Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Stephen Martin, and he is a near-death experience researcher. And I would like for him to explain how that happened, because I understand you're a businessman and author of a lot of best-selling books. And, how did you end up talking about near-death experiences?
Well, thank you, Peggy. It all began a long time ago when I was in my mid-20s. I was a bachelor living with two other bachelors in Baltimore, Maryland. I was working for an ad agency. We had an apartment in an old part of town called Bolton Hill. And it was an old townhouse. And it was a Saturday night, and I was upstairs in my bedroom, which was kind of unusual for me on a Saturday night, because I had a really bad case of the flu. So I was up there nursing the flu, and I was reading a book. In fact, I remember the book I was reading because I never finished it. It was Metamorphosis by Kafka. And I think the main character was turning into a cockroach at the time when I heard some people come into the apartment downstairs. I was on the second floor, and we had two floors in this old building. And so some people came in, and after a while, I realized there was a party going on downstairs. Well, when you're 25 years old, you're not going to let a little flu get in the way of a party,
Right?
So I felt really bad, but I got up, I put on some clothes, I went downstairs, I had a few drinks, I smoked, I did some things I shouldn't have done, and I started to feel just horrible. So I practically knee walked back upstairs to my bedroom and flopped down in the bed, which began, it seemed like, spinning like it was the propeller of a helicopter getting ready to take off. And I felt awful. And I felt my chest kind of expanding like it was going to explode. I felt like I was going to pop. And suddenly I found myself up around the ceiling, and I looked down and I saw my body on the bed. It looked kind of like roadkill down there. And it didn't last all that long, but I have to stop and tell you that I was brought up by parents who were what I would describe as scientific materialists. They did believe that if you couldn't see it under a microscope, it didn't exist. I mean, the basic premise of scientific materialism, and a lot of people still subscribe to that, is that nothing exists except matter. Matter is all there is, material substance. So here I was up at the ceiling looking down at my body. I'd never heard of a near-death experience. This was a long time ago. I'm in my 70s now, and I was 25 years old at the time. So I had kind of an epiphany. It was like, wait a minute, I'm up here, my body's down there. I thought it was my brain that created consciousness, and it can't be, because it's down there inside that guy sprawled out on the bed, and I'm up here. So how can that be? And I turned around, I looked at the room, I looked at the ceiling. I was about 2 inches from it. I could see all the little crevices and practically see the molecules that it was made up of. And I looked back down, and I'm having this, we must not be our bodies, because I'm here and he's down there. So anyway, at some point, it was very short in terms of what happened. I didn't see a light. I didn't go through a tunnel. I just was out of my body, and I blacked out at some point. And the next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was waking up, and I felt a whole lot better. But what that did was start me on a quest to figure out how that could happen. How could I be out of my body and completely conscious? And I actually felt pretty good while I was, before I left my body, I was feeling awful. When I was out of it, I was fine. And so I joined the Rosicrucian Society, which is a society of mystics that study metaphysical laws. And started out as an adept and started out as a novice and rose to adept. I took all their courses and passed them, the examinations and so forth. And then I guess I read everything I could about metaphysics. And when the book by Raymond Moody came out, the first book that I'm aware of about near-death experiences, it's called Life After Life. I read that in one sitting. I mean, I was glued to it because it answered so many questions. And of course, Raymond Moody, that was back in, I guess, the mid-70s when that came out. Raymond Moody had been I think he was a resident at the University of Virginia Medical School and talked to hundreds of people who had had near-death experiences and reported on them in that book. So anyhow, it became a fascination for me, and I have studied it ever since. Some years ago, from 2007 through 2009, I had a podcast. We didn't call them a podcast, we called it radio, internet radio back then, but I had an hour-long program once a week, and I interviewed people who were studying and trying to find out about paranormal activities and near-death experiences. I interviewed hundreds of people over that 3-year period. I interviewed quantum physicists. I interviewed psychiatrists who were working with people on past life regressions and on trying to free them of possessions from spirits and things like that, paranormal researchers, on and on and on, and really got a lot of material gathered that way, which I have used in books. I've now written more than 36 books, and not all of them are on this kind of subject. I've written 5 novels and some business books because I was successful in business as well. But I guess the most popular book I have on this subject is called Life After Death, Powerful Evidence You Will Never Die. And it contains a lot of evidence by different, very highly respected institutions like the University of Virginia and Duke University and other, research institutes and so forth on this whole subject. And the basic conclusion is that the brain does not create consciousness. The brain is a receiver of consciousness. Your consciousness exists somewhere else in a non-physical realm, and the brain captures that and integrates it with your body. It allows you to operate in this physical reality where we all are right now. But this physical reality is not your home, and your body is not you. You are that consciousness, that mind that goes on and is eternal. I think we're all eternal spiritual beings, and we're having a temporary physical reality right now and experiencing in this physical reality. So that's a long way to tell you how I got to where I am today, but I think that gives you an overview, Peggy. So back to you.
Was it any certain near-death experiences, or was it some research? Can you think of what points that really got you to like, wow, this really is real?
Excellent question. About 10 years after, I guess I was in my mid-30s, I, by that time, was married, had a child, and I had a good job, had a house, and life was good. And I was one afternoon, and I had studied all the metaphysical stuff with the Rosicrucians. Probably, I had read Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, and many other books about this whole subject of metaphysics. And I was in my backyard on a lounge chair, and it was a beautiful day like today. Today here in Richmond, Virginia, it's about 75 degrees. It's beautiful blue sky with little white puffy clouds and perfect temperature. and I was on that lounge chair, and I was kind of meditating, and suddenly it was like a camera lens clicked and everything changed. And I could see, it's really hard to describe this, but I could see the aura around trees and the grass and the flowers and everything that was surrounding me. And I had this feeling of total completeness, and that I was immersed in love. And as this continued, if I had a thought or if I had a question, it was like I could get a download, and I knew the answer. It was like I was connected. I think what it was is, for a while there, I was actually connected to the infinite mind, to the cosmic mind. And any question I had, the answer would come. I'd know the answer. And this, I don't know how long this went on, Peggy. Probably, it could have been an hour, it could have been a minute, because there was really no time in this state that I was in. But I was connected to the infinite, and I wanted it to continue. It was like, this must be what the seventh heaven is all about, the most wonderful heaven you could be in, because it was, I knew everything. I could answer any question. I felt complete. The feeling of complete was very much, it's hard to describe. At that and love were the two big takeaways from this. But after a while, I kind of, I don't know, opened my eyes, and I felt the camera click again, and I realized that I was coming out of it. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to come out. I want to stay in this state. But it was like I had sand in my hands, and I was trying to hold it, but it was slipping through my fingers, and it slipped away. And after a bit, I was back in normal reality. But to answer your question, that is what really was the mind-blowing thing that had made me accept all of this as fact, that we're part of this larger reality, this infinite mind. We are extensions of it. We think we're separate because we have our own egos, we have our own memories that have been built up in this lifetime. We have our own subconscious mind and our own habits, and so we think we're separate individuals. But at the core, at the base, we're all connected to that infinite mind, and we're all kind of extensions of it that are having our own experiences, but they're all filtered back into this infinite cosmic mind that we're all part of. And eventually, I think we will all return to that. As you know, I've talked to a lot of near-death survivors, and the experiences they have run the gamut. From, I talked to one man who was who had been in a gang, and he was a bad guy, and he had a near-death experience, and he says he went to hell. It was the most horrible thing you could ever describe. And when he came back out of it, he quit that gang. He went to seminary, and he's now a pastor in a Christian church. Then you have other people who have, different kinds of experiences. But I think the ultimate experience, and the one that we're all headed toward eventually, is that unification, that reuniting with the infinite mind, because we're all part of that mind. We're extensions of it, and we're all connected. We're all one. You've heard that. Mystics have been saying it for thousands of years. All is one. Well, it's true. We're all is one. So that tells you what. And I talk about this experience in my latest book. If people want to go to I'll get into more detail about it in my latest book, which is a follow-up to Life After Death, Powerful Evidence You'll Never Die. It's book 2 of that. I've made it into a series, and it's called Achieve Joy Now and bliss in the afterlife. And it's on the homepage of my website, shmartin.com, shmartin.com. Anybody goes to that website, if you look at the top, you'll see where it says books, and click on that and it'll show you all my books. But I put that one I just mentioned on the home page because it's my newest. So it'll tell you in more detail about that experience I had in my backyard that day. So there you go.
Have you given much thought into why you had that experience at the time you did? Had you just let go from something, or?
I think people have, I'm not the only person who's had that experience, obviously. It's called a mystical experience, or an experience of mystery. I think it was the college professor, Joseph Campbell, who had a series on PBS television 30 years ago about myths, the power of myth, I think is what it was called. And he said that anyone who has had an experience of mystery knows that there's a dimension of the universe that is not available to our senses. That's a quote. But so I'm not the only one who's had that, but I think the reason I had it was that I had done all that studying and that research and done the Rosicrucian courses. And by the way, the Rosicrucians know what's going on. If you really want to know what true reality is, go ahead and join that and go do what I did. And, I'd been studying metaphysics, and it was just the setting there in that backyard in a perfect day with a perfect sky. And I was happily married. I had a great job. I had a house that I loved. I had a child who was healthy. Everything was great. And it just all clicked, and it, somehow came together into that experience. Some people
gratitude
have it after they have it. Yeah, gratitude. Some people have that experience after the birth of a child. Well, I've talked to women who have had that feeling of merging with the infinite mind after they've given birth, and they have that baby, in their arms or whatever. And so, yeah, those are the kinds of times when it can happen. I think it can also happen when you're going through something that's very, very difficult, and you've lost all hope, and somehow or other you merge for a moment with the infinite mind and realize it's all going to be okay eventually and in the end. So
and they're both connections,
why,
aren't they? If you think about it, they're both connections to God. That deepest despair where we're searching for answers out into affinity and can't find any, or we're filled with such gratitude that we're like reaching out into affinity and appreciation. It seems like they're both a line of communication that opens up.
I think that's right. I think you've hit the nail on the head. One of those two situations, either everything is wonderful or everything couldn't be any worse. And that's when you connect. And people will have that connection and they'll try to get back to it. And you can, once you've had it, you're always partly connected to it, I guess. You're not completely ever severed from it, but it's hard to have the full experience. I've never had it again. I think people who meditate a lot and get very good at that can get very close to having it just through their meditation. But I do some meditation, but I'm not a regular, half hour in the morning and half hour in the evening like some people. So I don't get back to it that way. But I do feel connected, and I do know that we're all one, that we're all extensions of the infinite mind, and that what we need to do is to, what Jesus said, love one another. And I think if we all followed the golden rule and did unto others as we would have others do unto us, the world would be a great place. But unfortunately, it's not that way, especially these days.
And I think it's beautiful as a child coming from a background where there was no faith, that you were given experiences that led you towards a faith.
Yeah. And, you know, my wife is a very strong Christian. I go to church with her. I believe that Jesus was an enlightened being, that he had merged with the cosmic mind and was still merged to an extent through his whole ministry, and that his teachings are right on. I don't buy all the doctrine of the Christian church. I think that some people have come along and changed things. You know, for one thing, Christianity no longer accepts reincarnation, although they did for the first 500 and some years of the church, but it was deleted by the order of the Emperor Justinian at the Second Council of Constantine in 553 AD. But you know, I'm right on with Christian teachings, and you could say I'm a follower of Christ, whether or not I'm officially a Christian. So, yeah.
It reminds me, what you're telling me of yourself reminds me of, and I know I can't pronounce her name right, Archimani Karmark, the girl that paints the religious pictures, that drew the picture.
Yeah, I've seen some of her pictures. What, she's like 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah. And her story, I'm sure you've heard, but her family was atheist. They didn't have TV, radio. They didn't have anything spiritual at all, nothing religious. And like 3 years old, she started hearing God talk to her. And I've only read a story one time, and I haven't been able to find it again. And I wish they would bring it up more in her story. Is she was very sick or injured. I can't remember what. And there's another point where she was missing and they couldn't find her, and then she appeared. And so there's a couple things that makes you wonder, did she have a near-death experience when she was very small and she don't remember? Because there was a couple situations where she was in danger. But you know, just to look at her paintings and to hear her talk, I mean, just reminds me of, you know, like you, but it's totally different. You know, she has her art and her painting, and you have your research. But it's kind of the same thing as far as this child was not giving any faith of any kind, but yet something interjected itself into that life and said, here it is.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I feel sorry for people who are so stuck on scientific materialism that they just have their minds are closed. But because I think you could go through life with a lot of fear of death and so forth. I no longer fear death. I'm not worried about it. I know that I'm going to continue, that I'm an eternal being. And that really changes how you look at life, and how if you can get rid of fear, life is a whole lot better because of it. I mean, I still have things I worry about, if I'm going to pay all the bills this month, or, what things like that. But it's, I know that everything is temporary. It's not going to be something that I have to worry about next year or the year after. So it's just changed the way I live and the way I think. And if it hadn't, I'd probably be a decrepit old man by now. I just, but because I don't worry about it, I'm happy-go-lucky. I'm a nonconformist. I've been very successful in business because I am. One of the reasons, by the way, I'm a nonconformist, ancestors, and I've written a book about her, was one of the Salem witches. She was hanged in July 19th, 1692. She was accused of witchcraft and convicted and hanged. And, that's something I learned and heard about growing up frequently, because my mother was obsessed with that idea, even though it was her husband's ancestor. Her name was Susanna North Martin, the witch. And that is one of the reasons that I think I'm able to, or was able to change. I just don't necessarily take for granted that people who are in authority know what they're talking about, or are telling the truth, because those people back in in 1692 Salem for going around accusing people of witches, being witches. I've studied it. The name of the book, by the way, is The Witch of Amesbury. The Witch of Amesbury, and that's who my ancestor was. She was not a witch, though. I think that there were some women who were, that at least one of those who was hanged was actually practicing witchcraft. And there were certainly some who were before the Salem mess started, more in Connecticut, who were definitely practicing witchcraft and casting spells. And they had effigy dolls, voodoo dolls, sticking pins in them and things like that. But I would say that probably 9 or 20 who were killed, 9 were executed, 1 was killed because he never actually went to trial. There was probably only 1 who was actually practicing witchcraft, which was not a good reason to kill anybody anyway. Nowadays, there are plenty of people who are Wiccas or whatever they call them, who are really pantheists, and I think that mainly nowadays, those who practice witchcraft are more positive about it. They don't curse people and get.
I've got a bunch of them on my Facebook. I see them on there all the time. I'm a witch.
Yeah, right. And I think the modern witches know about karma, and so they're not going to harm anybody because they know it'll come back to them. And that's certainly something that is true. I think life is a lot like and I've said this in other podcasts I've done and in some of my books, life is a lot like Groundhog Day, that movie, where you meet Bill Murray's character, he's a jerk. He's kind of self-centered. He has all these things happen to him during the course of Groundhog's Day. And at first he just, does everything wrong. I mean, he's mean to people. He's dismissive. He's trips people up. He's a bad just a jerk. And then as time goes on, he wakes up, every morning. It's the same thing in the same situations. He's meeting them again and again and again and again. And finally, at the end of the movie, he does everything right. There's people come up to him. He saves somebody from choking. He pats people on the back that he was mean to before. He's a good guy. And finally, he gets to move on to February 3rd, and he even gets the girl who thought he was a jerk originally. So that's what life is about. We have all these different chances to get it right. And most of us don't get it right and have to come back and, deal with the karma that we created from the last one. So that's kind of my philosophy of life now.
Yeah. I grew up and my grandma was real religious. People call her a Bible thumper. And she gave us the impression, church gave us the impression that you're not supposed to go around anybody that isn't this Christian type personality. You got to stay away from this, stay away from that, stay away from that religion. So when you talk about the witches, I thought, and now I have all these different personalities, people I know, from atheists to whatever. And because my theory now is, why preach to the choir? If you're going to go around talking about near-death experiences all the time, why not open it up to everybody to see? Why block people off that probably need to hear it the most?
Well, we're all, and as I said, been saying all along in this little talk here we're having, we're all one. We're all part of that infinite mind, God, if you want to use, that word. I prefer cosmic mind or infinite mind, but because it's really, when I say the word God, I think of Michelangelo's painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is this guy with the long beard, reaching with his hand down to touch the human. And God is not a man. He's not a being like that. He is all pervasive. He is the ground of being. He's in all of us. We all come from that. Everything was created from that, and everything has that in them as at their core. So my conception of God is not what most Christians would.
And I think God is big enough to be anything to anyone. The near-death experiences are so different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of it depends on your culture. You know, if you're a Muslim, you're going to have a Muslim experience. If you're a Christian, you'll certainly. I have interviewed a number of Christians who believe, and I think they probably did meet Jesus. You know, and he was quite impressive when they met him, and it just so.
And I
You
have
know,
read that across the board throughout countries, Jesus is the most recognized person in a near-death
mhm,
experience
yeah,
across different
yeah,
religions. So
yeah.
have you
I
seen,
helped to.
go ahead.
I was just going to say I helped a very strong Christian write a book about his experience with cancer, and there's a passage in there about meeting Jesus in a near-death experience, and very, very powerful, powerful kind of message. So yeah, why not?
Have you seen the movie Perfect Wave, Ian McCormick's story?
No, I have not. Tell me about it.
It's very, very good. The guy, he quit going to church when he was a kid. He said, Mom, I don't want to go. I don't believe. Mom was real Christian. And he got to be, you know, a grown man. And he just said one day to his parents, I'm leaving. He was a surfer. I just want to go with my buddy and I want to just go all over the world and surf. Of course, the parents are upset and worried. You know, he goes off. He's doing his thing, partying, surfing, having a ball, traveling the world, getting the perfect wave, you know? That's what the
Yeah.
movie's called, The Perfect Wave. And he's out one night, and I don't know what kind of fishing or something they were doing. He was under the water, and he got bit multiple times by something they called the invisible. And I forget, there's other names for it, but I guess one bite will kill you. He was bit several times. He, long story short, he was taken to the hospital and died. I mean, he had the tag on the toe. He's dead. And his buddy was there, saw that he was dead, and he took off, told his friends, Ian's dead. A little later, you know, they're all sitting around the beach around the campfire. Ian shows up. Like, man, you're dead. He's like, yeah, I was. But Ian went to heaven. And part of that was God told him, he showed him a mass amount of people. He said, these are my children. I can't quote him, you know, but the gist of it, these are my children that he was showing him. These are ones that will never come to my house, go to church. These are the ones I want you to go back and tell about me. And that's what he did. He come
Hmm.
back and he has been preaching decades ever since, all over the world.
Yeah.
Ian McCormick, The Perfect Way.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I interviewed a man that had a similar kind of situation. He's dead now. Was a World War II veteran. He was 20 years old and died of pneumonia. He was dead for at least 12 minutes, maybe a little longer, and saw Jesus, met with Jesus, came back, and he had been like that, you know, not a strong Christian or anything, and really devoted his life. He became a psychiatrist, though, and devoted his life to,
Richie?
helping others. Yeah, Richie. Hmm.
He's passed away now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's gone. But he lived a full life. Because if he was 20 back in 1943, what would he be now? Gosh.
Yeah, his little book,
They
Return
were-
from Tomorrow, is my
yeah.
favorite.
Ordered to return, isn't it? Or
He's
maybe.
got a little one too. It's just a
Oh,
little
okay.
tiny book. I think it's brown. It's called Return from Tomorrow. And I love the
Yeah,
videos where it reenacts his story, where he's
yeah,
in the military and he gets out and, you know, comes back. And but yeah, it's that little book that went into a lot of detail about his story and getting out after that, going and becoming a medical doctor, and his decision to become a psychiatrist, and telling his
right.
story. And he said that he had, in order to become a psychiatrist, even though he's a medical doctor, he had to go up before some kind of review board, and
Yeah,
they wanted to know because he was coming about his near death experience, and they questioned him, and he was honest and said, this is true, this is what happened. And he said they passed him through. They said if you would have denied it, we wouldn't have passed you through, but since you admitted it and you're convicted to it, we don't become a psychiatrist.
right. Yep. Yep. That's right.
So, but you
Okay.
know,
Well,
it'd be nice if the rest of the world could have heard this because meanwhile, the rest of us are still worried that if we tell our NDE, we're going to get locked up in a psych ward.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure there are plenty of people like to lock me up in a psych ward too, but I'm not worried about it anymore. I'm
Not
way
anymore.
past that. Not at all.
Once the career's over, it's really frees you up to become
Yeah.
who you've always wanted to be, I think.
Yeah.
Have your voice and not care.
I have a good friend who's a lawyer, and he and I've had a lot of conversations about this sort of thing. He's very much into it, and he had a mystical experience, I guess you would call it, when he was 16 years old, and was contemplating suicide, and he was at home in bed trying to sleep, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, he had a friend over for the weekend in the other bed, and he said he was yanked out of his body, he felt like way up into the air. He could see the lights of the cities on the East Coast. He could see the sun rising over the Atlantic. And then suddenly everything was dark, and these little, what looked like a chain of Christmas lights came toward him. And he said, is someone there? And he got an answer. And all this was telepathic. There were no voices. It was all telepathic, mind to mind kind of communication. But they said, yeah, we brought you here because we have something very important to tell you. And he said, well, what do you have to tell me? And they said, your life is your own. And he said, my life is my own. Well, who else would it belong to? And they said, well, what we mean is that you can, here's this guy, 16 years old. So you can do whatever you want with your life. You can be whoever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. And you can even destroy your life. They didn't say kill yourself, but you could even destroy your life. But we want you to know that that would be a waste of time. And he said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're here to learn. And if you destroy your life, if you take your life, in other words, then you'll just have to come back and do it all over again and face the same kind of situation again, because once you start on a particular curriculum, you have to finish it. So that's why it would be a waste of time. So anyway, long story short, he goes back into his body, wakes up the next morning, and he, gets rid of that whole idea of killing himself, and, went on and everything was fine. And now he's my age, he's in his 70s, and he's a successful lawyer, but he's never told anybody about this. I think I'm probably the only person he's ever told about this. And he knows, he has been like me, studying all this stuff ever since then, and he knows probably more than I do about it now. But he's afraid to tell anybody because he's a lawyer and he doesn't want people to think he's crazy. So there you go.
Have you heard of induced after-death communication?
No, I have not. I've heard that somebody's working on some kind of telephone to the other side, some kind of way of communicating electronically, but I have not heard of that. What about it?
Dr. Alan Botkin is a therapist for veterans for a long time. And he worked with doing the rapid eye movement procedure. Mm-hmm. And he found that suddenly his patients were having like a near-death experience. And he started looking at his notes, and he had changed the procedure just a little bit. And so he started copying it, and he's getting like 80-90% effective. But the thing was, it was curing these patients of their PTSD in one session.
Wow.
He gives an example of this one veteran. He couldn't even bond with his children. He hibernated to himself and had a lot of issues because of, I think it's Vietnam. And there was a little girl that he was wanting to adopt, which found out Larry wouldn't be able to anyway, but he's really close to this little girl, him and his wife wanted to adopt. And not long before they were to leave, they got ambushed or something, and she was killed in front of him. And he had horrible, horrible nightmares. And he did this technique, this induced after death communication. And he saw her. Instead of a little girl, it was a beautiful woman in heaven. And she was talking to him. And he was healed. He was so happy. He went home and bonded with his family and had no more PTSD. And now they train a lot of people to do it. And so he has a book, IADC, Induced After Death. And so I got it, and it said at the back, and it's a little book, and it tells you at the end how to do it. And so I wrote down the little notes, and I tried it on my husband. I was shocked. It worked. His little brother died when he was 5 years old of leukemia. And I was getting to, like it says, get to the core sadness of it. And so I was kind of doing this little eye movement thing and getting to the core sadness. And I took my attention away from my husband's face for a minute, and I looked, and I saw this young man, kind of look like an Indian, like 17, 18, 20, I don't know, like running across my wall. But there's like this field of grass and this beautiful blue day sky behind him. And he was running along, looked at me, smiled, and turned, kept going. I'm going crazy. I look back over at my husband, and he's crying. And he just saw his brother in his mind as a child. He says, I haven't been able to picture my brother, what he looked like since he died. And he's seen him as a child. And so I went to his mother, and I said, his boy's name was Jeffrey. And I said, what did Jeffrey look like? Because I explained what I saw, what this guy looked like to my husband. And because the whole family's white complected, crystal blue eyes, but this guy looked Indian, darker skin, dark brown eyes. And I said, did he look more Indian? She's, yeah. Said he had dark eyes and darker skin. So I would have known this from the couple black and white pictures I seen of the family of him. You know, I didn't see him very many. And so I was just convinced, like, I'm sold on this.
Wow, that's something. Yeah. Well, I think we're on the cusp of change in how people view reality, and the big change is that we, you know, everything is not just matter. It's not true that only matter exists. There's much more to it. We're all part of a great energy gestalt, or whatever you want to call it, and we're all one. And the sooner we realize that, the better everybody will be. You know, maybe we'll start being nice to each other for a change, instead of picking sides and calling each other names.
So far, it doesn't look like it, though, does it?
No, we got
everybody that's so enlightened and aware, or whatever.
Yeah, we got a ways to go. Well, I hope everybody will come to my website, shmartin.com, and take a look at my books, and maybe get the one about life after death, powerful evidence you'll never die.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to say, or anything you've really learned or feel like you'd want to share?
Well, I think the main thing that I want to do with my books, and when I have podcasts and so forth like this, interviews, so I want to communicate to people that each one of us is a eternal spiritual being. We're having right now a temporary physical experience, but we are eternal. And when someone you love passes on to the other side, it's not the end for them, nor is it the last time you'll ever see them, because when your turn comes to pass to the other side, they're likely to be there to greet you and welcome you into your soul group, which you're all part of. So I guess that's my practice on everyone. So thanks for having me, Peggy.
I didn't catch that last part. You kind of going out, your last sentence there.
Yeah, that's what I want to communicate to everyone, that we're all one. And I appreciate you having me on and let me talk about it, Peggy.
I appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
So I will send this to you. I should have it ready by morning.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.